The Second Street Dreams audio network presents Classical Music in Color. I'm Judelin Lilly. Welcome to the podcast for BIPOC classical musicians and their friends. Stay tuned for the stories, the struggles, and the triumphs of musicians just like you. And most importantly, hear the music now being heard with ears that would not hear before. You might even hear some of your friends and colleagues on the show. So stay tuned. This is Classical Music in Color. Thank you for tuning in to Classical Music in Color for the week of December 17th, 2023. I hope you're having a wonderful holiday season. On this edition of the show, we're hearing from a conductor continuing his mission to expose the work of three African-American composers to the wider world. This is the music of composer Margaret Bonds. It is Decision, the first movement from her 7-part work, Montgomery Variations. It was composed in 1963 when Bonds was 50 years old. Imagine the world she lived in before 1963 and then the year itself. JFK was assassinated, Medgar Evers was too, there was the March on Washington, and those 4 little girls in Birmingham.
Based off the spiritual I Want Jesus to Walk With Me, written in dedication to the life and works of Dr. Martin Luther King, specifically dealing with the Montgomery bus boycotts and also the bombing of a church during the Civil Rights Movement. And so not only is this a thematic work with theme and variations from an opening theme and those 6 sets of variations, but it's also a programmatic work. There's many different stages of the Civil Rights Movement specific up to those events. Everything from Decision, the opening, and hearing I Want Jesus to Walk With Me in a very mighty and defiant tone.
My guest is Kellen Gray, the conductor and curator of the album African American Voices 2. He chose composers Margaret Bonds, Ulysses Kay, and Coleridge Taylor Perkinson.
The reason that I chose these 3 composers for this album as opposed to what we did previously is because I wanted people to know the diversity that exists within Black composers as far as the style, genre, and aesthetic. When you really survey all the Black composers that have ever lived, and particularly all the African-American composers and their various styles, they're all very different. And so you have Margaret Bonds, Ulysses Kay, and Coleridge Taylor Perkinson that all could have chosen to write within the same vein, but decidedly not.
In addition to producing African American Voices 2, Kellen Gray is holding down 2 jobs. He's an assistant conductor at the English National Opera and artist in association at the Royal Scottish National Orchestra. He's also conducted performances of some of the most prestigious orchestras in the world. That's a long way and years ago from his first introduction to classical music.
I had my first experience with classical music in the 6th grade in the public school system of Rock Hill, South Carolina. At the 6th grade, they make you try all the electives, everything from home economics to wood shop to band, chorus, strings. And it was a strange time in my life because literally the town I'm from is called Football City, USA. My father's a football coach by profession. I played football. And at this time, my growth started to slow down when everybody else's didn't. So just to give you a picture, in the 6th grade, I was probably about 4'8" to 4'11", somewhere in there. So it's not the biggest as far as being a football player anymore. But yet I got to touch a few musical instruments, and I found I was good at all of them. They gave us this grade like 1 through 5, 1 being the highest on all the instruments, and I got a perfect score on all of them. And suddenly I was good at something again. And I found community in the orchestra. We were a team, but everybody's winning all the time. We had special camaraderie. The only people I speak to from the 7th grade still are people I was in orchestra with, if that gives you some kind of clue. And so it was a new place for me where I sort of found my people, or found my tribe. And, part of that, sadly, was that there weren't a lot of people that looked like me within that. It's been a mission of mine throughout my career to make sure there are people that look like me that at least have the opportunity to be interested in it. There were so many more kids, infinitely more talented than me, but some of them decided not to go on with it because it either wasn't cool to bring a cello home, or or be seen with it on the school bus, or frankly lessons cost too much, and I had to mow lawns and do all kind of yard work for my lessons, pay for those and so on and so forth. But it was strange for some of my friends to see me with a violin case coming up, but I knew that it was my way to make a new possibility for my life, and so I stuck with it no matter what anybody said about it.
Which leads us to African American voices, too. And yes, there is a first one. We'll get to that in a moment. Gray is proud of the fact that this new album, performed by the Royal Scottish National Orchestra, marks the first commercial recordings of Margaret Bond's Montgomery Variations, published in 1964, Coleridge Taylor Perkinson's Worship, a concert overture from 2001, and Ulysses Kay's Concerto for Orchestra from 1948. I was ashamed to say that I had never heard of Ulysses Kay, but that did not surprise Kellen Gray.
Don't be ashamed to say that you've never heard of Ulysses Kay, because not many people have, but many people should, when you listen to his music.
Ulysses Kay was born in Arizona in 1917 and later studied at the Eastman School of Music in Rochester, New York. That's where his composing career began.
He won the Prix de Roma and all these other composition competitions. So clearly, the actual awards speak for themselves as far as the quality of his compositions.
This is his piece from the album, the first movement of 3 of Concerto for Orchestra from 1948.
But when you think about the time in which he composed, it was around that time that tonality broke, and so many composers were actually composing in atonality and composing atonal music. And he was one of a few composers that decided to stay with a tonal aesthetic, or even a modal aesthetic. So you have that point where he was sort of pushed to the side. You also have the fact that he was Black. I mean, it's sort of dual subjectivity here. He's pushed to the side for that fact, and the fact that he's a Black man in the first, half of the 20th century as a classical composer.
And then there's Coleridge Taylor Perkinson. Why did you choose Coleridge Taylor Perkinson?
Simply because I think people need to know about him. Perkinson, obviously, being just the equal jazz musician and jazz composer as he was classical composer. You hear really that influence in his style. Particularly you opening up in the Christian doxology, as far as the slow opening of his overture worship, a concert overture. And then when you get to the allegro, the fast section, it's very much these very almost scat-like fast notes and passages where you hear a texture that's not necessarily typical in classical music. These often strings and drums together playing literally the same rhythms. I think it's really, really unique how he sort of brings in this incredible probably mid 20th century jazz style, and brings it to the classical music stage. And I mean, he's done it so many times. I don't know why I'm surprised, but I think people need to know about him. I think he's an incredible composer.
Now hear what Kellen Gray is talking about in this, the full piece of Coleridge Taylor Perkinson's Worship, a concert overture from 2001. It's just under 7 minutes long. Worship, a concert overture composed by Coleridge Taylor Perkinson from 2001. The performance by the Royal Scottish National Orchestra, conducted by Kellen Gray. Is there a one, and did you conduct it?
There is a one. There is an African American Voices original, 0.0, and I did conduct that one. So that was an album of William Dawson's Negro Folk Symphony, William Grant Still's Symphony No. 1 Afro American, and George Walker's Lyric for Strings in between.
Kellen Gray, conductor and curator of the album African American Voices 2. Links to all are on the Classical Music and Color page on secondstreetdreams.com. As we end the podcast, I'm directing you to the Classical Music and Color page on secondstreetdreams.com. There are links to a string fellowship available in North Carolina. The National Academy Orchestra of Canada is looking for members. For our African listeners, Spotify has an SSA early career program, and the National Association of Negro Musicians is calling for proposals for its 2024 convention. Find the links to all on the Classical Music and Color page on secondstreetdreams.com. This is my last show for 2023. I hope you've enjoyed listening to Classical Music and Color. I plan to be back in January of 2024, all fresh and dewy with more stories to tell. Thank you for listening to Classical Music and Color for the week of December 17th, 2023. Happy holidays and Happy New Year. We are the Second Street Dreams Audio Network, emerging beyond the white curtain. I'm Jim Lincoln.